I'm Saran Fox, and this is Dan and Saran Take on Hollywood. Dan Watanabe is unable to be with us today, so we have sitting in for Dan the awesome Kai Justice.
Hi.
Who will hopefully channel Dan Watanabe and be his own special person. The subject today, the first subject of today, we have two of them, and perhaps we have no idea what else will come up, is patriotic movies.
Yes.
And so I would like to start. But before we start, I would like to pay homage to Elie Wiesel, who Holocaust survivor and champion of the Never Forget movement, brilliant author, philosopher, and human being. And he wrote, because as many of you know, I am an advocate for strong storytelling. What Elie Wiesel said in talking about God, he said, God created man because he loves stories. And then I was reading a book about invention and innovation, and it said, and this applies to all aspects of creativity, we are always seeking the intuitive perception of hidden things. So we need to get a little lost. And we're going to get a little lost in some movies now.
Beautiful.
Absolutely. I'm going to start with, and we're going to cover some British patriotic movies, but because it is and because we did separate, we Brexited from them many, many years ago. So we will honor the British film industry by mentioning some of the British patriotic films. But let's start with the most patriotic of American films, which is James Cagney's Yankee Doodle Dandy. What's your take on Yankee Doodle Dandy, Tom?
I loved it. I just, as from the point of view of an actor, as an actor, you look at that, and you look at someone who was cast mainly as a thug, a gangster for many years, and then he plays this very deep, thought-out character of George M. Cohan. And it's inspiring. It's a great story. If you haven't seen it, go see it right now, or at least after we're done. But I think it's a great story. It was well executed, and it showed what Cagney could really, really do. It showed what he could do beyond the stereotype, and how much he wanted to do that character, and how much work he put into it. And it just made the film all the more believable, and just such a great film all the way around.
You know, I agree, and he also had, as all the great ones do, a very strong sense of his own physicality, of his body. He was in total control. Now, he was a song and dance man.
Right.
He was originally in vaudeville. He could dance and sing, and so he got an opportunity to do that, because he did that in Footlight Parade,
Right.
which was a non-thug role. And I think that even though a lot of things were made up, he wasn't born on the 4th of July. I think he was born on the 3rd, and they created a wife. I think he was maybe been married several times. That's what they did with film biographies in those days. They made a lot of things up. Cole Porter, no mention of his being gay, Night and Day with Cary Grant. The thing is that I think that's written in our national psyche is that scene on the stage of Yankee Doodle Dandy with Little Johnny Jones. And the way he danced was so interesting because he held his body totally stiff and only moved his feet.
Yeah.
And so he's so interesting to watch how gleeful he was when he danced. And then there's that scene where he has just spoken to FDR and he comes dancing down the stairs.
That's right.
This was a man more than light on his feet, and an incredible... He channeled all that energy that he used in playing bad guys, where he was menacing and attractive and frightening, into playing this icon of musical theater.
That's right.
And if you've never seen the movie or never seen the scene where he dances and he goes to the edge of the stage and he dances on the side of the stage, absolutely wonderful.
That's brilliant. No, it's true. And I remember a few things about Cagney that just always come to mind besides Yankee Doodle Dandy, would be the fact that a lot of other actors said that he could throw a punch like no one else and make it land and look real without hurting you, which is, if you see a lot of outtakes from those times, people got really hurt because they hadn't quite worked that out in films yet. But another thing, I believe it was Cagney, correct me if I'm wrong, but when he was in front of, there was one experience where he was in front of the studio heads, and they were speaking to each other, or I think at one studio, and they were speaking in Yiddish in front of him because they would do that because they didn't think people would understand.
And he spoke
Yiddish.
And
he spoke Yiddish, and he spoke back to them in Yiddish.
Yes, and he said something like "Gurnish helfen," which means nothing will help. He grew up in Yorkville, which at the time there was a heavily Jewish population, and he grew up around other Jews, and he learned Yiddish. Interesting, because my father, who always loved show business, when I was 6 years old, taught us all these things. He said, Jimmy Cagney speaks Yiddish, and I never forgot that. I'm so glad that you brought that up. He's one of my absolute favorite actors, and like all the great ones, when he's on screen, you cannot take your eyes off of him. You follow him everywhere. Another one that is a brilliant patriotic film, and it shows the underside in certain ways of post-World War II, what happened to our vets. His Best Years of Our Lives, which won the Best Picture Oscar for 1946. And Yankee Doodle Dandy won the Best Picture Oscar for 1942. He was unabashedly patriotic. It was made during World War II when the Hollywood studio system rallied to help America keep its spirits up and remind us why we were fighting.
Successfully, too.
And very, very successfully. In addition, people like, I think, William Wyler, maybe John Ford, they made those films for the Army, for the military.
Oh, yeah, that's
they made
right.
films about why we were fighting.
Yeah.
And so...
Disney did that, too. A lot of the major studios did.
The government went to the studios and said, help
yeah.
us. Yeah, it's
I
very
think
interesting.
and that's actually why Disney did a lot. The Air Force went to Disney, and that's why a lot of the American military turned to the Air Force and started turning the tide of the wars because of a lot of the short animated features that were done about planes and air warfare.
Absolutely. I mean, to imagine living in a time when the fall of civilization was imminent. Yeah. And so these patriotic films really helped the public at home, and I know that they were probably shown, to the troops overseas. In Best Years of Our Lives, we follow 3 veterans who come home from the war. And one of them is Dana Andrews, Frederick March, and that scene when he comes home and he walks into the apartment and his kids see him, and his wife is in the kitchen, she doesn't see him, and he's been gone for 4 years. Yeah. And his teenage kids see him, and he tells them to be quiet, and she realizes something's happened, and she turns around and she runs to her husband. Yeah. And there's this embrace of 2 lovers who have not been together. It's a very, very powerful.
It's one of the most iconic images of that nature in film history.
And it's Myrna Loy and Frederick March. It's just wonderful. And Dana Andrews plays a man who married Virginia Mayo, who kind of overplayed her role a little bit. She put your uniform on. But he married her in haste and then went off to war, and she's been fooling around with the very handsome and greasy Steve Cochran.
Yep.
And
who died young, too.
Who did die young. Yeah. And Harold Russell, who was a non-actor.
Yeah, that's right.
Who actually had his hands blown off in an accident. He was in the Navy.
Yeah.
And about his coming home and readjusting to civilian life and rebuffing the advances of his girlfriend because he didn't want her to feel sorry for him. And there's a very, very moving scene where his father has to help him take his arms off, and he says if there's a fire, he can't help himself, so he would always need someone in the house with him to help him just in case something happened. And of course, in the end, spoiler, he marries this girl who loves him for him no matter whether he has hands or not.
That's right.
And Dana Andrews finds love with Frederick March's daughter, Teresa Wright, and in the end, we end with a wedding.
It's a wonderful film, and it is. And it really brought home something that hadn't been talked about a lot in films at all, was soldiers coming home damaged and broken. It wasn't just like a happy homecoming, but they came home with serious problems. I mean, that was the problem that a lot of veterans faced, and I think that's why it struck such a chord, because there was so much honesty, especially with the actor who had no hands. He had actually lost his hands in the military, and there's something very true about his performance because it actually happened to him.
Absolutely.
So those emotions are very intense and very raw when you watch the film, and it's because they're real.
And he never felt he may have felt sorry for himself at the beginning, but what he did was he advocated for veterans for the rest of his life. The only thing that bothered me is that he was an amateur actor and he did the best he could. He won an Oscar, and I'm from Massachusetts, and he still had that Massachusetts accent, and they were living in California. But you kind of suspended disbelief and really gave it to him. I actually think just about my favorite, because I just watched it for the first time. All my friends is Band of Brothers.
Oh yeah.
Which has the best opening credits I believe I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Just the way it's edited and how they cast it. It's 10 episodes of a platoon that landed. Paratroopers that landed behind Normandy Beach after it was stormed and then went through France and then Germany, and what happened to them in 10 episodes. It was produced by Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg and in 2001, and it's absolutely a must-see for anyone who wants to see what some millennials could learn about safe spaces. I mean, these were young men in their late teens and early 20s who faced hardship and combat and managed to come through. and fight for their country. So I think it's a great lesson about courage and bravery, And they were frightened and they didn't want to be there.
That's right.
But they did it. They obeyed their commanding officers, followed the chain of command. So anytime, the one thing about what the military teaches anyone who's in is to subsume your ego and be part of a team, to always look out for your mates. And so it's beautifully written and beautifully done, very powerful, and I highly recommend it.
I believe there was a sequel to that series called The Pacific. Wasn't there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I don't know, I haven't seen it, and I don't know how good it is, but I think I shall have to see it now.
That will be next.
Yes, thank you, Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg.
Because the film that they did that set all that off, of course, was Saving Private Ryan, a film
Yes.
that I personally loved, and it's an amazing film, and the first time war had been portrayed with such graphic detail.
Yes, and even more so in actually Band of Brothers.
Yeah.
It even more. I could only watch one episode at a time, especially when there were battle scenes, because it was so frightening.
Yeah.
I have issues with Saving Private Ryan. I think the opening, not the invasion of Normandy Beach was obviously incredible. I just had problems with the opening of him in the cemetery and Am I a Good Man? I mean, I thought Spielberg one more time hit all the emotions, and I thought that the ending should have been him. They should have paralleled the scene at the beginning when the army guy comes to tell the mother that her sons are dead, when she collapses on the front porch. I would have ended it, not with him as an old man in the cemetery in that crappy makeup, but have the same scene with the car coming, and he gets out of the car and surprises her. That's how I would have. I thought it was very manipulative emotionally, and I didn't believe a word of it when he was in that cemetery. Am I a good man? Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. I mean, that wasn't the point. That's my opinion about it. And a lot of people argue that year it should have won because over Shakespeare in Love, and I think Shakespeare in Love was a much better realized film for what it was setting out to do. And I've gotten a lot of flack about that, but I stand on my principles.
Well, there you go.
There you go. Absolutely. So tell me another one of your American films, patriotic films.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, my God. Patriotic films.
Let's go back to the Revolution. You're very drawn to the Revolution, I know.
I am.
Yeah.
And early America, because it was so tough. Just taming the land.
No, Netflix.
Taming. I don't know. Really?
Can you imagine?
My God, what was life without Netflix and cell phones? I mean,
Yeah,
we
really.
were Neanderthals.
Yes.
Drums Along the Mohawk is one of my favorite early American films.
Henry
It's
Fonda, yeah.
beautifully shot. Going back to the film aspect of it, just about three-strip Technicolor, which is also one of my personal favorite.
Now, what is three-strip Technicolor?
That is 3 strips of black and white film that are run through a camera, and they are dyed in a specific order, and then they are put together, and there's a transfer print made after, and it's just the most glorious color.
Yes, it is. It's
the
kind
most
of soft.
Rich. It's hyper-realistic color.
Yes, it is.
The reds. Technicolor is always the reds. You notice the reds in it are usually the first colors that pop out and smack you in the face. And wonderfully so. But it's just my favorite process. You had Gone with the Wind was 3-strip. A lot of early films. Samson and Delilah was, and it's a gorgeous film. Just color-wise, I mean, it just pops in. It's so hyper-realistic. It gives you cavities.
Yes. I love that. What else?
Oh, my God.
Because I know you've gone back there.
Yeah, there are definitely
We're
a number of
consulting our
films.
list, ladies and gentlemen.
One moment, please. Oh, The Howards of Virginia was an
Yes.
early favorite of mine with Cary
Who
Grant.
was in that?
It was
Yes.
Cary Grant and Martha Scott.
Yes.
And that was a wonderful film. It's not usually thrown up there in the pantheon of great Cary Grant films, but it was definitely a fun film. If you want to see him in a wig, that's where to see it.
Yes, absolutely.
How about yourself?
Myself, let's see. Let me just take a look at this. Oh, I want to talk a little bit about Born on the 4th of July, which, because we are American, people can dissent and protest. It was the underbelly of, because he starts off as a very patriotic young man,
Yes.
and then becomes very, very disillusioned. And I think that Cruise gave a very, very powerful performance. I think it's one of the few times he's played an actual person. Like a person,
Right. Yeah.
like
A real life individual.
a real life individual instead of a superhero or super agent,
Yeah.
where he had a family, he had a girlfriend. He was terrific in this film. That Oliver Stone has his theories about things, and some people agree, some people disagree. But he's a very powerful filmmaker when he sets out to make a film.
Right.
JFK,
Yes.
I think, was a patriotic film. It's one of the I actually, when I was in entertainment payroll, I paid the editors in post-production. And, they were like, I took care of them, made sure they got their checks every week. And when I saw the film, I said, I hope Pietro and his crew win the Oscar, because it was the most incredibly edited film I think I've ever seen, because they did it in 3 time frames. And if you were around at that time, it captured the feeling of that day. And I think that his thesis may have been full of crap, but I think it was beautifully done. A beautifully done film, absolutely.
Have you seen the film Executive Action?
With Hackman?
No,
Clint Eastwood?
No. This is a film about. It's like JFK, but it's a version in the '70s done with Elmer Gantry. The actor is in Elmer Gantry.
Burt Lancaster. Oh my God, I must have seen that years and
so
years
many
ago.
people haven't seen it that are huge fans of his, because it was rushed in and out of theaters. It was
What year?
I think it was 72-ish.
Oh, wow.
And it was rushed in and out of theaters in about a week. It was about the conspiracy theory, because it was based on some speech that Lyndon Johnson gave, an interview he gave before the cameras were rolling at one point. And they had to have that edited because he didn't want that getting out. So it was just film kind of based on that. It's a little documentary-ish in a way. I mean, in its style, and the people, it got mixed reviews. It was rushed out very quickly once it was made. But it's an interesting film if you like JFK, if you like the style. It's like the opposite end of JFK. You need to watch them as a double bill.
Yes,
it's very
absolutely.
interesting. But Executive Action, not everybody's seen it.
And I'm going to go off topic a little bit and recommend that those of you who haven't taken the time to see it, first of all, earlier in the year we had the dramatic series about the O.J. Simpson trial, which was absolutely incredibly done, and there'll be a lot of Emmy nominations for the acting and the writing and the directing. It was superbly done, with the exception, I believe, of Cuba Gooding being cast as O.J. Simpson. Yeah. Is the O.J. Simpson, the Made in America that ESPN did in conjunction with ABC. 7 hours, and it has footage and interviews and photographs I've never seen. Plus, it has a certain perspective, O.J.'s place in America, coming from the projects and becoming who he was. I did not realize, because I'm a girl who's not into football, is that he was one of the greatest running back ever. Watching him run it's like poetry. And he seemed to have a really great character. He did good things and said good things, and this other side of him that's revealed. I absolutely highly recommend it. It's a sociological piece and very dramatic and an incredible documentary. It's called O.J. Made in America, and I just finished watching it the other night. And once again, I could only watch 2 hours at a time, because it's really, there's a lot of Marcia Clark you see things you've never seen, and you get a perspective that you didn't have. So I if somebody says, "Oh, I'm sick of that, I lived through it," you've never seen anything, like this. Now, getting back on topic, a lot of people believe Rocky IV is a tremendous patriotic movie because he defeats a Russian, doesn't he?
He does.
Yeah.
Definitely when we were still going through the Cold War,
yeah.
before it ended.
Yeah, because he drapes himself in a flag afterwards. Now we have this blatant patriotism, and then we have, a little bit more subtle patriotism, like in something like Band of Brothers, which is showing us how these men fought for freedom and suffered tremendous losses and weren't what is a hero? Someone who's afraid and does it anyway. Right. Someone who says when there are difficult times and challenges is that I'm not afraid. You feel the fear and you do it anyway. I mean, that's courage. Not being fearless is sometimes being stupid.
Right.
So tell me more about your list.
Wow, Rocky IV, that's interesting. I'm still kind of reeling from that. We're talking about, just to go back to what you were saying internal versus external patriotism. Mm-hmm. And I was curious, Rocky IV, at the end of it, does it grip you emotionally at all?
No.
Let's be honest.
I think that as time went on, Stallone got more and more kind of creepy buff.
Creepy buff? What's creepy buff? Let's.
After Rocky II, he got creepy buff.
Rocky III, he was ripped.
He was ripped, and so this is why Creed kind of cleansed my palate, because it's such a great movie.
Yeah.
And so, no, I think it was much more manipulative. I think that Rocky was so organic and so beautifully written and done. There was no self-consciousness. He didn't have a message.
Right.
You know, you got to
Right,
be
right.
careful about your message. You can't pound your audience over the head with it.
Yeah, what Hitchcock always said not to. Like,
Don't.
Message, yeah, don't.
And
No
what did
message.
Sam Goldwyn say? The master of malapropism, or he said, if I want to send a message, I'll call Western Union.
Yeah,
which is
that's
not
right.
a malapropism, but the audience, and you insult your audience when you pound them over the head with the
There's a
message.
right and wrong way to do it.
Yes, there is.
Sometimes they're speaking to your audience and then speaking down to your audience. Which
Then there's United '93, which was made in England. It was an American film, but it was made in England. I
That's
have a
right.
friend who was in it, which is harrowing, and people who knew they were going to die who fought back, and I could only watch it once because it made me angry,
Yeah.
and I wept. I wept at the courage of these Americans to fight back. That's patriotism. You fight back against the enemy, and the enemy has changed, and very, very, very powerful. Also, Patton.
Who's had very dubious releases on home video, but as a film itself is wonderful.
Oh, do you have some insight into what they have they re-edited, or what do you
No,
mean when you
no,
say dubious release? What do you mean?
Not re-edited, remastered. The remastering was always a bit off. They used something called DNR, digital noise reduction, early on, which just kind of swipes the grain off. It cleans up the film digitally, but it also takes away the film grain, and it takes away details. So
Yes.
people look rubbery in their face. It's kind of the way they did Spartacus originally when that was remastered. It wasn't redone, and it was released a few times on home video on Blu-ray, and they got a lot of complaints because it just didn't look right. Because part of the art of the film is how it originally looked, and you want to go back to the way it originally looked. Even if the film stock they used was grainy, you keep it,
Right.
Because that was the intention, and that's just the way people experience it. But eventually, it was fixed, and the newer versions of Patton are acceptable. And just like Spartacus, they went back as well, and which is also a kind of a patriotic film in its way. It's one man standing up for for what's right,
Right,
in
right.
the face of
Right.
terrible adversity. But they fixed it. They scanned it correctly, and they didn't tool with it or toy with it too much, and it looks great.
I had no idea. I just have to say something about Thai justice. There's a line from Moonstruck where Loretta's father, Vincent Gardenia, is with his mistress, and he's telling her all about the copper plumbing and this and that, and she goes, "Oh, Cosmo, you have such a head for knowing. You have a head for knowing. I
Thank
learned
you.
so much from you.
Thank you so much.
for sharing
And
that.
that's comforting because I thought you were going to slap me and say, "Snap out of it."
Yeah, really.
So, another great line from that film.
Rim shot. Okay, then we have a film like Air Force One, where you have the president and you have the president's plane, and you have the bad guy terrorists. And
Get
you
off
have-
my plane.
Yeah, and you have Harrison Ford doing all these brave things. And was Glenn Close the vice? Who was the vice president in Air Force One?
Anybody? Google.
I think it was Glenn Close
can't
or
remember.
somebody.
I just remember Harrison Ford punching a guy and him flying off Air Force One.
There you go, Han Solo
That's
at work.
right.
Absolutely.
And Han shot first in that one. Again, that would be more outward patriotism, would
Yes.
you say? And
Yes.
and how did you feel? I'm talking about manipulation in film because in a lot of ways there are more subtle ways to do it, but sometimes they're just as effective. Sometimes.
I think my feeling is I believe we're the greatest country on earth. We're flawed. We have issues, but we've dealt with them, like slavery and civil rights. And, we saw the wrongs and we righted them. And I think I like it when Glenn Close, our producer, our crack producer, has told us that it was Glenn Close, that I think that I always like it when it's like Bruce Willis in
Die Hard.
Die Hard, the American hero.
Yeah.
That is like part of our national character, standing up to the bad guys.
It's kind of a catharsis.
It's
I
a
think.
catharsis, and then there's pride. Because
Yeah.
you say, there's our president, he punched out the bad guy.
Right.
There you go. Another patriotic film that I wept through the end. I cried like a baby. I mean, I broke down and cried, was American Sniper.
Oh yeah, I love that movie.
It's
Yeah,
a great movie. He killed all those terrorists to protect his fellow soldiers.
Yeah.
He was doing his job. I think Bradley Cooper is amazing how he has grown as an actor. American Hustle, American Sniper. I mean, he's become so versatile. He's not just a pretty boy.
Right.
And it's very powerful. It's very moving. And the ending, when they show the real funeral, I was with my younger son, and he was hugging me while I just totally broke down. Because I had, like 6 months before, I just started shooting. I just gone to the range with friends who were teaching me about safety And I know that it's a release and it's mastery, and you're safe and you're secure and you enjoy hitting your target. And here was someone who had an incredible eye and a sense of, this is my job, this is what I have to do. I can't let any of my fellow soldiers be killed by these guys. And then the way he died, So it was
not in battle.
Not in battle. And I think it is a very patriotic film.
Oh, very much so.
Yes,
I agree.
I love snipers. Remember the sniper in Barry Pepper played the sniper.
Barry Pepper, yes.
Saving Private Ryan.
He's intense.
Oh,
he's got an intense look.
In my life these days, because I'm so busy, and I bump into things and I forget things. I need a seeing eye dog, a secretary, and a sniper. Just in case.
Especially when you're in traffic. I'm kidding. I don't support
road rage. No, we do
rage.
not support violence, road rage. But it's a good thing I'm not armed.
Right.
Because, there are times when I am being tailgated, which is my pet peeve, when I would like to pick them off.
Right. Well, I usually, when I'm in the 10 items or less line in the grocery store,
Yeah.
I can imagine just being strapped going 11, 12, 13, nope, no, I'm sorry. Sometimes it's good not to have a gun.
Sometimes it's good. Let me look at my list here. Well, of course, there's Sergeant York.
Sergeant York,
Gary Cooper.
He was terrific in that.
Yes.
It was wonderful.
He was so humble.
Yeah.
He said, basically what he said was what did he do in World War I? He held off, he killed and then he held off all these Germans. He did all these things single-handedly, and he was so freaking humble. A young man from Kentucky, right?
Yes, that's right.
Yes.
Yeah, he was a farmer from Kentucky, was he?
Yes.
So, yeah.
Gary Cooper played Alvin York and Lou Gehrig. I mean, come on now.
Yeah, that's right. And two amazing performances. That's
Absolutely
right.
Absolutely.
They were expendable.
John Hodiak.
Yeah,
Yes.
That's right. It's a terrific film.
Yes, it is.
Robert Montgomery.
Yes.
And John. Is it John?
Those are like the B actors.
Yeah,
the
yeah.
nice-looking, B actor guys. Yeah.
Everybody came to the forefront when it came to World War II. It's funny. There's an era in Hollywood. You had the 30s, and you had a very ultra-glossy look. And then when it came to the 40s, the ultra-glossy look and the Great Depression, and then you had World War II where everybody was a patriot, everybody played soldiers, and you had some really intense storylines. I mean, John Garfield played in a film I can't remember, but he's blinded in the film.
Yes, Al Schmidt.
Yeah.
I can't remember the name of it.
It was an amazing film, an amazing performance. But they really stepped up. And it's funny because in that era, too, a lot of younger actors who didn't go to war took the place of the older actors that were out in war, like Tyrone Power was out fighting the battle as well. But there's a very intense line of storytelling, and World War II and that ultra patriotism, that coming together that America did, it changed filmmaking forever after that, because there was no more. You had musicals and they had their place, but after seeing what you see in war,
yes,
happy endings don't cut it for you.
It led the way to film noir.
That's right.
And it paved the way for more realistic films.
Portrayals,
It took quite a while, because then the 50s there was kind of this. It had its own. There were very few films that were realistic and hard edged
in America.
Yeah, but of course there was an explosion in Italy and France. Neorealism, and it wasn't until the late '60s with The Graduate when we had our first anti-hero.
That's right.
Dustin Hoffman.
And I think it was Spartacus too. Thinking back, that changed a lot of things in terms of violence, because in enacting war as they did and a lot of the prosthetics they used, they really tried to show the brutality of a physical war with swords. I mean, it's different than a war with guns, but they changed a lot of things in that film.
What, 63, 65?
1960.
1960, because about 8 or 9 years later was The Wild Bunch.
That's right. Oh, Peckinpah.
Yeah.
Oh, Sam Peckinpah.
Oh, he loved violence.
Oh, he did.
Oh, he had issues.
He had issues.
Sam definitely had issues.
There's
Something to do with his mother,
there.
I'm sure.
Right.
And then there's Stripes.
Bill Murray.
Which it's a little bit like in Private Benjamin.
Oh, that's right.
Which Private Benjamin is. I love that film because first of all, it was Goldie Hawn when she was at her most adorable, and it shows this spoiled Jewish girl whose husband dies making love on their wedding night. He dies. Albert Brooks dies.
Poor Albert.
Poor Albert. And she's spoiled, and she joins the army. She joins the army, and she grows up. As often, my husband used to say about immature, because my husband had 2 years in the army, but immature young people that we knew, he said they need 2 years in the army. He said just to straighten them out, And so she spent her 2 years in the army, and she grew up.
Yeah, that's right.
And then she meets Armand Assante. So while she's becoming this mature, level-headed young woman from this spoiled brat that she was, she meets this guy, and she still has romantic issues. And so at the end of the film, she faces, the bull crap that he's giving her and walks away from him on her own wedding day. And there you see her full maturation, her full growth as a woman. And that scene where she's walking on that path, but from that beautiful French house, you know, in France they have those roads with the trees, and it's actually a terrific film and very patriotic because it shows her getting something from being a soldier.
That's right.
Learning how to be, you know, be a person, be a grown-up person. You know,
in a more complex way, I think, not in a more complex way, but in a different way, I think of Officer and a Gentleman as well.
Yes, I've got nowhere to go.
Nowhere to go.
Yes, that scene.
Yeah, there's a lot of iconic imagery from that film.
Yes, there is.
It really did. 1980?
Yeah.
Was it 1980? 81?
82?
Was it 80 to 82?
More or less,
yeah.
yeah.
In the early 80s.
And I read the script before it was made,
Oh, wow.
and you knew right away this was going to be a hit. A brilliant script, wonderful
Louis
script.
Gossett Jr. and
And that scene with Richard Gere when he breaks down, I've got nowhere to go.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so sad.
Yeah.
So, and you knew those two would be divorced in 5 years, but you know who cared? He
Yeah,
carries her out of the factory.
It was a cynical happy ending.
Yes, it was absolutely. It's like the ending of The Graduate.
Right.
But now another patriotic film based on a true story is Miracle, which is how we won. Well, we won the playoffs at the Olympics in 1980 against the Russians, and we played the Finns. I can't remember exactly, but we beat the odds. The hockey team, and most of them were from Boston. And Kurt Russell, the wonderful Kurt Russell, played their coach. Yeah. It's a great film, and it was when they wrapped themselves in the flag, and it was a time when we were still in the Cold War. Mm-hmm. The wall had not come down yet, and it was a time when it was like the scrappy Americans beat the overtrained, you know, Russians, and then the Finns, or vice versa. I'm not sure.
It's funny you mentioned that. I think that's the success, the underdog story.
Yes,
it's basically,
and we love an underdog story.
And that's what a lot of the war movies are about.
Mm-hmm.
They're about going up against, especially, I guess every war movie, but especially World War II and even World War One is a small band of brothers or a small band of individuals fighting the large war machine.
Yes.
This inhuman machine that's coming to take over the world and take away your rights and your freedoms and your humanity. And it's about David and Goliath.
Yes.
It's about David defeating Goliath.
Well, you know, we were the original Brexit.
Yeah.
Right? We were the underdog. We were the little guy breaking away from England. You know who doesn't like underdog is the English. You know how we root for the underdog? They have kind of that class system where they're not terribly happy when people get too successful, and we just love a success story because it tells us that, you know, as much as we love the British, you know, they've got their ways, you know.
Wonderful tea.
Wonderful tea.
And Downton Abbey. We can't fault them.
And those accents. Every time any of them speak, it's Shakespeare to me, right?
I know.
Yes.
Where's the loo? Then we fall in love. Oh, my goodness.
And of course, we have every John Wayne film
ever made.
That's
right.
Ever made.
Yep.
Larger than life. I'm looking at Red Dawn.
Red Dawn.
Talking
the
about
original,
the underdog.
The original
one
or
with
the remake?
Patrick Swayze.
The original, the 80s.
A lot of these remakes, you know, in my world, I say they don't exist.
Chris Hemsworth was in the remake.
Was it good?
I didn't hear too much about it. Of course, they have to change the enemy. It's not the Russians anymore. It was, I guess, the Middle East that was attacking America.
Chinese.
Was it the Chinese? It was the Chinese. Forgive me. I'm sorry. I get those mixed.
The original with Patrick Swayze. Who else was in the original?
Oh my God! There was a laundry list of like the.
Is it like the Coppola movie with Tom Cruise and Thomas Howell? What was that movie
Thomas
called?
Howell. The Outsiders.
The Outsiders.
Yeah, it was,
you know,
it was kind of like that.
Star, big star, kind of a big star. There were like 8 of them.
Right. It was kind of there were a couple of the Brat Pack, I think.
Yeah.
There's something like them, like that. Yeah, that was a big deal in the '80s. But yeah, a lot of the remakes that come out now, especially with iconic, even somewhat iconic films, kind of get brushed away very quickly. They're forgotten very quickly.
Well, you know what they do? What they seem to do is they take something that is of a certain size and they blow it up.
Yeah.
It's not that it was a small movie, but there was a perspective that it had. And what they do sometimes is they make it too big, and it becomes inaccessible emotionally. It feels like you're being manipulated.
Gotcha. A product of its time, and it's hard to redo something that's a product of its time.
Yeah, it's you know, we could do a whole hour on the lack of originality,
Next
the fear of originality in Hollywood, and the totals, the focus on the bottom line, which is important.
Right.
That to me is obscuring the need to tell great stories and original stories, and. That's for another time. Right. Let me look at
Good
my
topic,
list
though.
Oh, Mr. Smith goes to Washington.
Oh my God! Now, if that doesn't grip you at the end, you have a heart of stone.
Absolutely.
How could it not? I mean, that is one of the ultimate expressions of someone's right from podunk, wherever, and just to go to Washington, or go to the Capitol and just stand in front of every powerful man, the most powerful people in the United States, and just speak your case.
And you want to know what's also another patriotic film that's interesting is Born Yesterday, with Judy Holliday and William Holden.
Oh my gosh!
Because she plays the bimbo mistress of this gangster tycoon,
Broderick Crawford,
and Paul Douglas played him on the stage.
That's right.
And they go to Washington, and he's got these sneaky deals with some senators and things, and he hires William Holden, who's a newspaper reporter, to educate her, so that she can appear to be sophisticated in front of these people he has to meet. They fall in love, and he teaches her about her rights as an American.
That's right.
And they went to the House of Representatives. They actually shot in Washington.
Yeah.
And in the end, she stands up for herself and quotes the Constitution. So that's kind of a patriotic film. It doesn't have to be a rah-rah America film like Yankee Doodle Dandy, but it can have some kind of a message about, well, these are your rights, and this is what it means to be an American. Yeah. This is what's good about it.
That was a wonderful film. That was very enjoyable.
Yes, it was.
It was. Jeez, trip.
Glory.
Glory.
If that ending doesn't tear your heart out.
Yeah.
When they were all thrown in the grave together.
The mass grave.
And the music, yeah.
Denzel
Glory.
won the Oscar for that.
Yes, he did.
Yeah,
and he was an anomaly. It's a lot of critics, and I kind of agree. They made the way he spoke a little too modern. Mm-hmm. He was a little bit of a mouthpiece.
Right.
But that said, it's a brilliant, brilliant film, beautifully photographed, and it captured the spirit of it. And it's about the Black Regiment that was organized during the Civil War and that fought very, very bravely. And then they all died.
That is true. And it's funny because Denzel Washington recently said in an interview, he was on I think he was just being interviewed in front of an audience, but he said the first film that he was offered, one of the first big films he was offered, he said it was like, he was going to play a black character, big old smile with a noose around his neck. And he goes, it's said, he was told early on that the first real film you do is kind of how you're going to be seen for the rest of your career. And he goes, I'm not doing that. And he turned it down, and he waited for something better. Then eventually he did, of course. He did a movie I love called Carbon Copy.
Yes, with George Segal. That was so funny.
But he always played a character of dignity and respect.
Yeah.
And in Glory he did as well. And he and that one tear, just that tear got it. You're like, oh, you're winning the Oscar.
There you go.
There you go.
Well, he has played many iconic roles, and he's also played American Gangster.
That's right.
And Training Day.
Oh my God, he really flipped the script in that film. Because you didn't see him like that before.
No.
You're like, oh, he's Denzel, he's the hero. And you have somebody who's known as the hero that he's like Gary Cooper.
Yeah.
Just don't make him the bad guy and you're fine.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden he plays this role that's so vicious and underhanded and evil. Yep. And he does it so well.
Well, acting, and I will speak to the young ladies who are present here, that somebody once said that Denzel was like Sean Connery, that he was a man for all women.
Exactly.
Yes, exactly.
Very good.
Exactly.
Yeah. I agree.
People talk about The Sandlot.
The Sandlot?
That it's about baseball,
Americana.
I think the defining scene takes place on July 4th. That baseball is our national pastime, even though football has kind of overtaken it. Another film is Argo, American Ingenuity.
That's true. That was a wonderful film.
That was a wonderful film.
Directed by Ben Affleck.
It was the ensemble acting was amazing.
Yeah. Bryan Cranston as well. Oh, they were great.
Yeah, and the actors who played the hostages, they were awesome. I'm so in awe of great acting, as you know.
Well, it's funny, you said The Sandlot. That reminded me instantly of A League of Their Own, something that's not on my list.
Yes.
That was also during World War II.
Yes.
That is a patriotic film.
Yeah, that is a patriotic film. And also a film about, I don't like anything this is about women's rights. Tell me a story and let the subject matter be women's rights. But tell me they told personal stories. It was funny. And there's no crying in baseball.
Some of the most iconic lines from any baseball film are from League of Their Own. I saw that. I think my mom took me to go see that when I wasn't even a teenager. I was a kid. I was young, 7 or 8 years old. And that always stuck with me. It was a wonderful film. Tom Hanks.
There's also the HBO series John Adams with Paul Giamatti and Laura Linney. It's wonderful
series.
And I had one more. Let me take a look here. Red Dawn, Pat. Air Force with Mr. Smith.
How about Since You Went Away?
Oh, Since You Went Away. This was, with Claudette Colbert.
Yeah, Shirley Temple.
About a family. You never see the father.
No.
This family is living as best they can while their husband and father is away at war.
Yeah, which is another aspect of it, is those who wait, those who were waiting and waiting for word every day. You'd hear
Oh my
for
God,
word
can you
of the
imagine?
death of a loved one.
And wasn't that with Jennifer Jones and Robert Walker too?
Yep,
Yes.
I think they were both in that.
Yes, absolutely.
That's right. I forgot about that. And then of course you had the films like Stage Door Canteen,
Yes.
which were rallies in among
Yes.
themselves, because you had every star in them, and which really just kind of boosted morale as well.
Yes.
Those are fun.
And
Those are
the last
fun.
one I want to talk about, because I know you want to talk about your British films,
Sure.
is Field of Dreams.
Oh, if you
Which
build it, they will
which in
come.
its own way is very, very patriotic, because it's about an American who had a dream, and his wife may have thought he was a little crazy, but because this is America and it's the land of opportunity, he built it so they would come.
He heard a voice. He built a field.
He built a field. Now it's a film for men, because for me, as much as I love baseball, I'm like, okay, I thought it was hokey, but I understand, its appeal. It's the universal appeal, or the appeal of baseball to Americans, especially American men. So I think there's a certain I think a patriotic film can be one where the ethos of America, the can-do, and anything is possible, because this was the first country in the world where this became our byword, it was our theme.
Right.
The land of opportunity. Now, before we move on to the wonderful subject of Olivia de Havilland, why don't you name some of your favorite British patriotic films?
Oh, just a few. Powell Pressburger, Michael Powell, Emmerich Pressburger were some of my favorite filmmakers. Great filmmaking team. One of the films they did was The 49th Parallel. That was with Olivier and a few other stars, and it was a very unique take on Nazis. And the Nazis are characters in it, but they're Nazis that I think they tried to infiltrate America through Canada or another country.
Yes.
And it was very, and forgive me if I'm getting that wrong, I haven't seen it for a few years, but it's just a wonderfully unique take. Olivia plays a very different character, but it's just another type of patriotism. And there were a couple, that's the funny thing. During World War II, you had Axis powers and the Allied forces, Allied powers, British and America were closely tied. So you had films that boosted morale on both sides of the pond. And another one which was Noel Coward's In Which We Serve.
Yes.
Which is a terrific, beautifully shot 3-strip Technicolor film, and it's a gorgeous film about generations and war and life and love and all of that. So the Brits had their wonderful, much emotionally more subtle. Definitely,
Yes.
a little more. That usually in their films built a bit more tension for
And,
me. As
well,
an
they
American.
were on the front lines. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
we were safe here in
yeah.
America.
They started in '39, and we started in '41.
And they were bombed.
Yeah,
and they had,
heavily.
They had issues.
Yeah.
I would like to close off this part of our discussion. Absolutely. I almost forgot an extremely patriotic film with many, many different themes.
Gestapo Spank.
Is what?
Gestapo Spank.
Casablanca.
Yeah.
Because our reluctant hero.
That's right.
Our reluctant hero does the right thing for the cause.
Would you call him an anti-hero until the end?
I'd call him our protagonist. Yes, he's an anti-hero.
Yeah, I never thought of him like that until you mentioned it. And
yes, he is an anti-hero, but he's he wears a facade. He acts as if he doesn't care when Ilsa comes in.
Mm-hmm.
But then he breaks down and says, of all the gin joints in all the world, she had to come into mine, right? And then he has that scene, excuse me, I'm going to be with one earring.
Very chic.
Yes. He, gets very angry at her for not meeting him at the train station in Paris that day. I mean, Bogart plays him, he's very tough and he's very hard. It's a veneer. And underneath it is this very vulnerable man who does care, because one thing after another, he does the right thing for that young couple. He does, and then in the end, he does the ultimate right thing. He gives up the woman he loves for something that's greater than him.
That's right.
And that's very powerful and very patriotic, And at the same time, never loses that cynical, the combination of the cynical and the vulnerable is always appealing, especially in a male hero. Right. Very, very appealing.
It's a very good balance, and the one scene where the two anthems come together.
Yes.
And
the Marseillaise overpowers.
That always gets me every time.
Every single time. It's such a great film.
Wonderful scene.
Now let's talk about Olivia de Havilland, who turned 100 on Friday, July 1st.
Wow.
And won 2 Oscars for a movie called To Each His Own, about a woman who has an illegitimate child and gives him up to be raised by her sister or by her friend.
Right.
Yes, and has to watch him grow up and cannot tell him who she is. And for one of the great screen performances of all time in a movie called The Heiress, which was adopted from a book by Henry James called Washington Square, 1948, 49, with Ralph Richardson and Montgomery Clift.
That's right.
And it's about a very shy woman who's under the thumb of her very mean doctor father. And she meets a handsome young man who courts her and wants to marry her.
Montgomery Clift.
And her father's convinced he's after her money.
Mm-hmm.
And she refuses to believe. And when he cuts her off, he says, "You're not going to get my money." Montgomery Clift disappears.
Mm.
She's bitter. 5 years later, Montgomery Clift reappears. And she tells him that she'll go off with him because the father has died.
That's right.
And then she doesn't, and he's knocking at the door, and she's sitting there weaving, or she's doing something. And the thing about Olivia de Havilland is she played Melanie in Gone with the Wind,
Right.
a very strong character who was overshadowed by the character of Scarlett O'Hara. But when you take a look at her by herself in that film, she's extremely powerful and strong. She has that inner strength, you know.
She's a pragmatist.
She's a pragmatist. And that scene where she's holding the baby when they're going through Atlanta, she's a protective mother. She understands and forgives Scarlett. She's Scarlett's biggest advocate.
Right.
She loves her, and
Yeah.
she gets her. She understands her. Olivia de Havilland was intelligent, and then she played in The Snake Pit. She played Insanity.
Yes.
And then
It's
she
hard to
made
watch. It
8
was so
films with Errol Flynn.
That's right.
8 films, most of them action films.
Those films are Dodge City from 1939, The Adventures of Robin Hood in 38, The Private Lives of Elizabeth and Essex, 39, Santa Fe Trail, 1940, Thank Your Lucky Stars, 43, Captain Blood, 35, Four's a Crowd in 38, They Died with Their Boots On in 41, and The Charge of the Light Brigade in 1936.
And if you watch these films, there's Errol Flynn, that handsome, sexy, virile guy. And there's this kind of demure, she looks demure, with this young woman. She had a lovely face. She wasn't gorgeous, but she had a lovely face. And she still does at 100.
Oh, yeah.
And she had like a steel rod up her spine.
Right.
See,
Spine, yes.
What did I say?
Spine. You said spine. You're okay.
Did I say
you're
spine?
Good. No, you're good.
Did I say swine? What the hell did I say? It's been a long day. She had a steel rod up her spine,
Right.
and so she was a match for him. In real life, he adored her.
Yes.
And wanted to marry her. Now, he was a roue, a womanizer, an alcoholic, a drug user. I mean, he was everyone's dream nightmare.
Perfect catch.
Perfect
Yeah.
catch. And she refused. She never slept with him. And she refused his advances, which only fueled him even more.
Right.
But she had a good head on her shoulders. She married a Frenchman, has lived in Paris for 60 years. He's died a few years ago. She has 2 grown children. She's smart. She's funny. And in the 60s and 70s, she went into TV.
Yeah.
And she made Dan Watanabe's, one of his favorite films, Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte.
That's right.
And
That was a major
she was
motion
in.
picture.
It was a major motion
Yeah,
picture.
it was a major one.
She was in Roots: The Next Generation.
Yeah.
Lady in a Cage with James Caan.
The Screaming Woman,
Yes.
which is very interesting, a TV film. Yeah.
She never lost her dignity, though.
No.
She never lost her dignity doing kind of, well, if I say schlocky and Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte, I will get bitch slapped, but by Dan.
Not by me. I don't hit
No.
women.
But she, it was a different kind of project that she was acting in.
Well,
but
times
she
are changing too,
Yes.
especially for an older actress. But she still made smart decisions.
Yes, she
Yeah.
did. And the
Very pragmatic in real life.
The de Havilland decision, where she rebelled against Warner Brothers, trying to
Yep.
keep her as an indentured servant.
In a descending quality of films.
Yes, where she went 3 years without pay and without making a movie, but the courts unanimously decided in her favor, and so that kind of broke that system.
That's right.
Between her and Betty Davis, between 2 women,
Yeah.
2 very strong women,
Yeah.
that was broken.
That's right.
Absolutely.
And yeah, they not only would, they wouldn't. It's funny how they just wouldn't let you go. They would make sure you disappeared.
Yes.
They would ride you down the staircase of lesser and lesser films until you became an obscurity and were done.
And the interesting thing is that she had her best roles away from Warner Brothers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she enjoyed all those films and was good in all those films that she did with Errol Flynn,
Right.
but she got her Oscar for To Each His Own. It may have been RKO, I'm not sure, and of course The Heiress was not made by Warner Brothers. I highly recommend a look at The Heiress.
Yeah.
It is bone-chilling. Those
Universal.
last half an hour is bone-chilling,
Yeah.
with Montgomery Clift knocking at the door, and she ignores it.
Yep.
She has her revenge.
Yeah, she was. What was the line? Dan Watanabe was citing it to me. We were talking about this the other day, and he said one of the most bone-chilling lines or phrases from that film is when they talked about her being cold, and she says, "Yes, I've learned well.
Yes.
I've been taught well.
I've learned from the best."
I've learned from the
which
best,
was her
yeah.
father.
Yes.
She had a very cold father.
Dan he said something interesting too. He said the film changes, your perspective on the film changes as you age, because when you're younger you see it as just this unfair, horrible thing that the father's this horrible person, but when you get older you realize he was right.
Yes.
That and when you see the film you realize at the end that he was very right, because he was just after her money and he's a cad.
He's a candidate. It was the way that he treated his daughter. He basically said, "Look at you. You're
It's the
plain
way.
Jane. Why would such a handsome young man be interested in you?"
He was trying to help her. Yeah, he did it.
He was trying to help her, but he said it in the wrong way. But he was absolutely correct.
That's right.
It's a great that I could see her sitting she was sewing or knitting or something, and she has this look on her face that's and she's very still, but she has this look of determination. And she's had her revenge.
It's bitch face. It's
Yes.
very bitch. It's very determined.
A very
like,
resting bitch face.
that's
Yes.
right. Determined. But you
Absolutely.
mentioned Lady in a Cage,
Yeah.
which was a surprising film. You were talking about the changing times in the films, and Lady in a Cage was made in '64, and it was part of that revolution and that movement. And Lady in a Cage is a very odd film in a
Yeah.
way, but she's very good in it. And again, she's a lady trapped in an elevator in her home.
By James Caan. It was his first film.
It was his first film, and he dies pretty graphically and gory, graphically at the end. But spoiler alert. But she's wonderful in it, and she's very attractive in it too. There's
Yes.
something about let me see. She was
50. She was in her 50s.
and she
Yeah.
looked great. And
Yes.
the way her makeup, the lighting, everything was perfect. She was Lady in a Cage, but she was still very attractive.
She hit the genetic lottery, because when you see her now at 100, she's got all her marbles.
Good genes.
She looks old, but she still looks. She
doesn't look 100,
She's not a
yeah.
wrinkle old crone.
Yeah.
And she had a very famous Joan Fontaine, the actress, who won for an Oscar for Rebecca.
Yes.
They had a very
Tumultuous
relationship. A big there was a lot of competition and jealousy, and they both had stories why. But it was so interesting. They had two parents who produced two incredible Academy Award-winning actresses. Powerhouses, absolutely. What I like about someone like Olivia de Havilland is the intelligence behind those eyes.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's always something moving.
There's always something going on, and I really, really appreciate that.
Dan was actually talking to me about the scene after Scarlett kills the soldier.
Yeah.
And de Havilland's character says, "Can we go through his wallet?" Basically asking, "Well, do you think it'd be okay if we went through his wallet?" And she had a sword with her. And, yeah, there's just something very. He's talked about how cunning she was throughout
Yes.
the whole film. You don't see it initially, but if you look, it's there, because there was one scene I grew up. Whenever she would make excuses, one scene that always struck me growing up is when she would always make excuses, and in one scene in particular, she makes excuses for Scarlett.
Yes.
And you think to yourself, well, she has to be either very stupid or very smart, because she's keeping her enemy as close as she can to her. Because Scarlett's trying to take her man, and she was the whole time. So you either think she's very dumb and very, very, she's very stupid, but after a while, I think you realize that she's keeping her enemy very close.
She's keeping her close, and she also, for some reason, didn't feel threatened by her.
No.
And even though Ashley did have feelings for Scarlett, he knew Melanie was right for him.
That's right.
And I think Melanie had a lot of belief in herself and in that relationship.
She knew it. She
knew it. I loved how she was with Scarlett.
Yeah.
Because
at first it bothered me, but
yeah,
but after a while you watch it.
Oh, she's just a patsy.
I know. I was like,
she's
don't let
not.
yourself be used. Look at what she's trying to do. She's right in front of you. Absolutely.
Interesting. Well, this has been an awesome hour. Is there anything else with the time we have left that you'd like to discuss?
Let me check the list. I think we actually went through all of it. Oh, My Cousin Rachel. That was
Yes,
one
with Richard Burton.
That
One
was
of his first films.
One of Twilight Time's first, or one of the first 10 releases through Twilight Time.
That is based on a book by. She wrote.
Very out
My
of print.
memory. I can't remember. A wonderful English writer.
Terrific film where she
Yes.
plays a horrible person, or
Yes.
someone very manipulative.
Daphne du Maurier.
Du Maurier,
Yes,
yeah, Rebecca,
yes.
who wrote Rebecca. So it's a wonderful. It's funny how they both are in tales from the
it's
same writer.
interesting.
But it's a terrific film. They're
Yes.
both wonderful in it. She plays a wonderful evil character.
Yes, she was capable of playing so much. God bless her.
Yeah. Happy
God bless
100th.
Happy 100th.
And
Olivier.
100 more.
And 100 more. But how do they say in Italian? Cindan.
Cindan.
Cindan. This has been awesome, and we are
We're
But
done.
to wrap, we're going out. This is Saran Fox on behalf of myself and Dan Watanabe for Dan and Saran Take on Hollywood. Our thank you, Ty Justice, for being such a great guest.
Thank you.
And we'll see you next week.
Bye.